A beautiful and confident young black woman set out to buy a few personal items, but soon became the target of an arrogant white police officer. Her sharp words cut through his pride, sparking a chain of events that spiraled out of control. What he didn't realize, however, was that she wasn't just a victim. She was the mayor's daughter. And this was only the beginning. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful and meaningful stories. The morning was crisp, with gentle sunlight streaming through the glass windows of a modest little supermarket on a quiet street. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, with just a handful of customers leisurely browsing the aisles. Alyssa Carter walked in, her bright red coat a striking contrast to her shiny blonde hair. Her big, expressive eyes and smooth, flawless skin naturally drew the attention of everyone around her. Today, Alyssa planned a quick stop, just a few personal items, and out the door. She strolled down the aisles, her fingertips lightly grazing the shelves. Picking up a bottle of lotion, she smiled, satisfied, before moving on. But her moment of quiet contentment shattered when the glass door swung open, the bell above it jingling to signal a new arrival. A middle-aged man in a police uniform stepped inside, his presence oozing arrogance. Charles Baker, known in town for his disdainful attitude, especially toward people of different backgrounds, scanned the room with a sharp, entitled gaze. His piercing blue eyes landed on Alyssa, and a smug smirk spread across his face. Adjusting the gun at his belt, he sauntered toward her. "Well, today's my lucky day," Charles announced, his voice loud enough to turn heads. Alyssa's brows furrowed slightly, but she ignored him, focusing on the shelves in front of her. Charles was undeterred. He leaned casually against a display near her, his tone oozing mockery. "You're beautiful, you know. That hair, that red coat. You remind me of one of those fashion store mannequins." Alyssa turned to face him, her eyes cold and unwavering. "I'm busy. If you have nothing better to do, please move out of the way." Charles let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Oh, so you've got a little fire in you. Someone like you shouldn't act so unapproachable. I was just giving you a compliment." Alyssa's voice was calm but sharp as a blade. "Praise or harassment? Either way, I don't care. Stop bothering me." Her words caught Charles off guard, his smirk faltering for a split second before his expression hardened. "Who do you think you are? Some Hollywood star?" he sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Don't get too cocky, girl. With your skin tone, you should be grateful I even noticed you." The words hung heavy in the air, silencing the supermarket. A few nearby customers exchanged worried glances, their indignation barely concealed. Alyssa's jaw tightened, but her posture remained firm. She stepped closer, her voice low and steady. "Do you think that uniform gives you the right to talk to me, or anyone, like that? It doesn't make you a good person. It just makes you a coward hiding behind authority." Charles's smirk wavered, his composure cracking. "Don't think you can talk to me like that," he hissed, lowering his voice but sharpening its edge. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Alyssa crossed her arms. "Oh, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A bully who abuses his badge to intimidate women." Her words hit their mark, slicing through Charles's fragile pride. His face flushed red, his hand tightening around the gun at his hip. "Apologize," he demanded, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Right now. Apologize." Alyssa's voice was unwavering, calm yet defiant. "Not a chance." Charles's anger erupted. He yanked the gun from its holster, raising it threateningly. "One more step and you'll regret it." Gasps filled the air as customers screamed and scrambled to the edges of the store. The staff froze, unsure of what to do. But Alyssa didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on his, fearless. "You just made a big mistake," she said, pulling her phone from her pocket. Charles hesitated, momentarily thrown off. "What are you doing?" Alyssa didn't answer. She calmly dialed a number and raised the phone to her ear. Meanwhile, in a large office at City Hall, Mayor James Carter was wrapping up his morning work, preparing for lunch. The dignified, middle-aged man was known for his composed demeanor, no matter the situation. His desk phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, He saw his daughter's name flashing. A call from Alyssa at this hour? He frowned, picking up. Her voice came through steady but unusually serious. Dad, I'm at the supermarket on Main Street. A cop is harassing me. He just pulled a gun on me in front of everyone. James shot to his feet, his face darkening with fury. A police officer did what? Are you okay? Is anyone hurt? I'm fine for now. But he's still here, and things could escalate. You need to act quickly. That was all James needed to hear. He slammed the phone down and pressed the intercom on his desk. Get the sheriff in here. Now. Moments later, Sheriff Robert King, a tall, stern-looking man, entered the office. What's going on, sir? James turned to him, his voice like thunder. One of your officers just pulled a gun on my daughter. At the supermarket on Main Street. I want him dealt with immediately. Robert was momentarily stunned by the mayor's words, but his professionalism quickly took over. I'll assemble the team right away. Would you like to come along? I'm coming, James said, his tone razor-sharp. She's my daughter, and I intend to see this through personally. No one dared to argue. Within minutes, James's security team had mobilized. A convoy of 3 sleek black cars roared out of the City Hall compound, their blue lights flashing, heading straight for the supermarket. Inside the supermarket, Charles Baker stood his ground, the gun still dangling in his hand. His eyes burned with defiance as he sneered, not in the least bit intimidated by the horrified stares of the onlookers. Who do you think you are? Call whoever you want, Charles spat, his voice dripping with arrogance. I'm a cop. Nobody can touch me. Alyssa, calm but resolute, met his gaze with a look of utter contempt. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Charles. And you will pay for it. Charles threw his head back and laughed. Pay? Don't kid yourself. In this uniform, I am the law. What do you think a girl like you can possibly do? But his smugness vanished as quickly as it appeared when the blaring sound of car horns echoed from outside. Moments later, a convoy of vehicles screeched to a halt in front of the supermarket. The glass doors swung open, and James Carter strode in, flanked by Sheriff Robert King and a security detail. James's expression was thunderous, his barely restrained anger making the air in the room heavy. The crowd instinctively parted, clearing a path for him. What is going on here? James demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. Charles, startled by the unexpected arrival, hesitated for a moment, but quickly attempted to regain his composure. Turning to face the mayor, he didn't immediately recognize him. I'm on duty, he said, trying to sound authoritative. James stepped forward until he was standing mere inches from Charles. His eyes were like steel. Doing your job? He asked, his voice icy. Is threatening a young woman with a gun your idea of police work? Do you even know who she is? Charles's smirk faltered, but he forced himself to laugh. I don't care who she is. She caused trouble, and I dealt with it my way. Sheriff Robert King stepped forward, his voice firm. Put down your weapon, Charles. You've crossed the line. Charles froze, his defiance wavering. I was just doing my job, he stammered. This isn't your job, James said, his voice rising with controlled fury. This is abuse of power, intimidation, racism, and you're going to face the consequences. Charles's face turned pale as the reality of the situation began to sink in. His eyes darted to the crowd, where every face now looked back at him with a mix of anger and disgust. James gestured for Alyssa's phone, and she handed it to him. Watching the recorded footage, his expression grew darker with each passing second. The video made everything painfully clear. Charles's harassing demeanor, his crude comments, his escalating behavior, and finally, the moment he pulled his gun on an unarmed woman. James handed the phone to Robert, his voice cold. Look at this. Robert watched in silence, his jaw tightening. When the video ended, he turned to Charles, his tone decisive. Charles, you violated not just department policy, but the law itself. You're done. Hand over your badge and gun. Now. You can't do this. Charles protested, his voice tinged with panic. This is all being blown out of proportion. She provoked me. Provoked you? Robert snapped, stepping closer. Pointing a gun at the mayor's daughter isn't a provocation. It's a career-ending mistake. You're suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. But with what I just saw, I doubt you'll ever wear this badge again. Charles hesitated, his grip tightening on the gun. But under Robert's steely gaze and James's palpable fury, he finally relented. Trembling, he unfastened his badge and handed over his gun. The supermarket was dead silent. Every onlooker watched as the arrogant officer's facade crumbled, leaving behind a man stripped of his authority and his pride. James stepped closer, his voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. Do you think wearing that uniform gives you the right to do whatever you want? To discriminate, intimidate, and abuse your power? You are gravely mistaken. He turned to the crowd, his voice booming with righteous anger. As mayor of this city, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. No one, no matter their position, has the right to act like this. Racism, harassment, and abuse of power have no place in this community, especially not in law enforcement. The crowd erupted into applause, cheers rising in solidarity. James faced Robert, his tone firm. Make sure this incident is fully investigated. If necessary, refer it to higher authorities. This city deserves justice. Robert nodded solemnly. I will, sir. A few days after the incident, Charles Baker was summoned to the police station to face the consequences. He arrived looking disheveled, his once proud uniform replaced by civilian clothes. His usual arrogance hung by a thread, unable to mask the weight of what was coming. In the small conference room, Chief Robert King sat at the head of the table, flanked by police department executives and a handful of attorneys. The air was heavy with tension as Charles took his seat, knowing he was about to hear the final verdict on his career. Robert began, his voice calm but cutting. After a thorough internal investigation, the police department has reached a decision. You are hereby dismissed from the force, effective immediately. Your actions at the supermarket not only violated the code of conduct, but also brought shame to the entire police force. Charles's face flushed as he tried to protest, his voice trembling. I told you, I was just doing my job. This has been blown way out of proportion. If it weren't for that girl. Robert cut him off, his tone firm. Don't even try to blame the victim, Charles. The video, the witnesses, and the evidence all make it clear. You initiated the harassment, you threatened someone with a weapon illegally, and you used racial slurs. That is undeniable. Charles scanned the room, his eyes searching for even a flicker of sympathy, but every face turned away, resolute. Realizing his fight was over, he stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. As he turned to leave, Robert added, and remember this, your case has been handed over to the prosecutor's office. You will face the law. Charles froze mid-step, his shoulders slumping under the weight of those words. Without another word, he left the room, his steps heavy with shame and despair. Immediately after Charles's dismissal, the prosecutor's office launched an official investigation. Video footage from the supermarket, witness testimonies, and records of Charles's past behavior were compiled into a damning case file. The lead prosecutor, a formidable woman with a reputation for fighting injustice, wasted no time. Charles Baker will be charged with unlawful intimidation with a weapon, abuse of power, and racially motivated harassment, she announced at a packed press conference. The media seized on the story, and it quickly became national news. Headlines like Police Abuse of Power Faces Justice and Racism in Uniform, a call for reform, dominated the front pages. Local residents, particularly those from marginalized communities, organized peaceful protests demanding transparency and accountability. Many carried signs that read, "No place for racism in law enforcement," and "Protect everyone equally." The public rallied around Alyssa, applauding her courage, while Mayor James Carter was hailed for his unwavering stance. He became a symbol of leadership and justice, earning respect not only in the city but across the country. A month later, Charles Baker's trial began, drawing widespread attention. The courtroom was packed with media, lawyers, activists, and members of the public. The prosecution wasted no time presenting their case. Key evidence included the video footage of the supermarket incident, which captured Charles's harassment, threats, and blatant misuse of power. The video left no room for doubt. He had used his position to intimidate an unarmed woman. Charles's defense attorney attempted to argue that he had acted under work-related stress and had no intention of causing harm. However, this defense crumbled under the weight of the prosecutor's sharp rebuttal. Charles Baker not only acted unlawfully but abused his power to harass and intimidate, the prosecutor stated firmly. This is behavior we cannot and will not tolerate, especially from someone sworn to protect the public. When Alyssa took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Her demeanor was calm and composed, her voice unwavering. "I'm not here for revenge," she began, her tone steady and resolute. "I'm here to ensure that no one else has to endure what I went through. Justice isn't about punishing one person. It's about setting a standard that protects everyone." Her words resonated deeply, drawing admiration from those in attendance. After hours of testimony and deliberation, the jury needed less than an hour to reach their verdict. The judge, his expression solemn but firm, delivered the decision. "Charles Baker, you are convicted of unlawful intimidation with a weapon, abuse of power, and racially motivated harassment. This court sentences you to 2 years in prison. Furthermore, you are permanently barred from holding any position in law enforcement." As the verdict was read, Charles sat motionless, his head bowed in defeat. Everything he had, his career, reputation, and future, had been stripped away. The trial's conclusion did not mark the end of the story. Instead, it sparked a nationwide conversation about accountability and justice within law enforcement. The incident became a wake-up call, serving as a catalyst for reform in the city and beyond. The media continued to highlight the case, praising the decisive actions of Mayor James Carter and Police Chief Robert King. Community leaders called it a turning point, a moment that proved even those in positions of power are not above the law. For Alyssa, the spotlight was unwanted but necessary. She became a symbol of resilience and the fight against injustice. Appearing on television programs and speaking at public events, she used her platform to advocate for change. "What I want to see," she said during one interview, "is a police force that truly protects everyone, regardless of skin color, gender, or background. I believe we can achieve that if we stand together." The Charles Baker case became more than a scandal. It became a lesson. It reminded the city and the nation that power is not a tool for oppression and that injustice, no matter how small, must never be ignored. Life moved forward, but the ripples of the event remained, leaving a lasting impression. It spurred reforms, united communities, and inspired hope that the fight for equality and justice was far from over, but winnable. Thank you for taking the time to hear this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share it with your friends and family, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. By doing so, you won't miss out on more meaningful stories like this one.